Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We want to allow you to get to the bar as soon as possible. So
Yeah, the
thank you for
bar
hanging
is waiting, but we're like a drink.
We're just like a drink.
Yeah.
We're a cocktail.
We're like a drink.
Yeah. So thank you for sticking around. It's been an amazing day, and we're really very happy to be winding up today with a story of our relationship.
Our relationship.
It's a sweet story. It's a typical story of a relationship. It has, the flirtation.
The flirtation.
Then there's passion.
Honeymoon phase.
Yep. Yes, and then there's doses of reality.
Doses of reality.
A little bit of struggle.
Some struggle.
And we had a baby.
We had a baby.
So as you can see, we're going to talk about what happens when a big corporate network gets together with a wildly creative indie. Before Kaitlin and I met, I'll tell you my origin story first, and then Kaitlin's going to tell you hers, and then we'll talk about the baby we made and the struggles therein. But before Kaitlin and I met, about 3.5 years ago, I left my career in television, very, very long career in television, to go into audio, and I went over to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, so Canada's public radio, because there was an opportunity to develop new programming, and I instantly focused about 95% of my attention on digital, so on podcasting, because the opportunity was obviously perfect. And so to kind of start with, nothing in a podcast offer and look at a fairly traditional radio service, the thing that we knew we had to do was to reach younger and more diverse audiences, to be relevant. It's really what you guys were talking about in the last session, is being relevant as a broadcaster means reflecting those, the vast array of people and perspectives and voices. And we weren't necessarily doing the best job on terrestrial radio. We have a fairly white, old male audience. And so my goal was to really start reaching new audiences and to be relevant. And so, and it was really to get unheard voices heard. And so we started out from a place of strength. We started out with sort of tapping into our investigative news brand and built up one by one podcasts that kind of earned credibility and didn't scare too many people about what the CBC was up to. We had to tread carefully. But I knew that we had to innovate. We had to gradually create content that was going to push at the right time and strategically, but really get us to a place where our listenership was really broad and relevant. And so if I fast forward to 3.5 years later, this is a smattering of what we've created in that 3.5 years. And this is my sort of unabashed little bragging section, so if you'll just forgive me, we've become Canada's #1 podcast publisher. Thank you. And we've got this is just some of the 21 series that we have right now that touch on different genres, including crime and investigative, comedy, learning and discovery. We've got an audio memoir with Love Me. We've got family and kids content that we're developing. But one of the things that was a nut that was tough to crack on our own was audio fiction. And it was something that was really important to us. Just to give you a sense of, in the past, CBC Radio had a venerable audio drama department, but over time, with cutbacks, there was, they shuttered the doors, they sold the props, they sold everything, and it was shut down. And it was a real shame because the CBC used to create some incredible audio drama, but kind of more old school traditional audio drama, which was great, but I knew that, as we all know, that it's a genre that is just exploding in podcasting, so it was always a goal to create it. But so achieving the amount of success we did, we average about 21 million downloads a month, and led by Someone Knows Something, which is our crime podcast. So we established enough credibility and enough kind of, I wouldn't say swagger, because we're Canadian, we don't really swagger, but enough confidence that, the time was right to really start exploring working on something in audio fiction that was going to be unlike anything the CBC had created before. And so I'm going to show you a sizzle that it was our fall sizzle, and it includes the baby we had. So after you take a look, I'm going to pass it over to Kaitlin, and she'll tell you sort of her origin story and how we came together. But this is where we are now.
If you wanted to commit a murder, would you not say, well, I'm going to have to kill whoever I pick up tonight, so I better take a weapon?
I'll be one of the ones who falls in love passionately and deeply and stays in love forever.
It's like we're floating through time-space and there's just a string that keeps us together.
We're going deep into the archives and scouring the records to find the things that have been left out of Canadian history.
Can we break it down step by step? What happens first with this plan? Who is getting taxed?
Then we get to adulthood and we're in this relationship with someone.
I just slept with a complete stranger.
My dad was once a millionaire, but he died a convicted felon.
And at the same time, I'm thinking, how am I gonna get out of here? Like, literally, where is the back door? How do I escape?
So that's where we are with CBC Podcast, and it includes, as you can see, a really, really exciting project called The Shadows, which we launched this fall, and I'm going to pass it over to Kaitlin to tell you where she was before we got together.
Hi, I'm Kaitlin. This is a photo of me and my former collaborator, Mitra Kaboli, in what we jokingly would call Audio Smut Studios, which was us under a blanket with a microphone, like anywhere, anytime, anybody's blanket. We just got a blanket with the microphone and tried to make the show sound good. I don't know how many of you know that recording under a blanket is the best makeshift studio. It gets hot though, it's awful. It was really exciting when we moved up to my closet. That took a while though. So if you don't know me and my work or my story, I'll just tell you a quick version. I started out 10 years ago at an anarchist radio station in Montreal called CKUT. And the beauty of CKUT was that there was no barrier to entry. They don't tell you what to do, you don't have to apply, you don't have to pay, nothing. You go in, they give you a recording device, they say, figure out how to use it, you're on the air at 6. And so that's what we did for 3 years. We figured out how to use it, we figured out our sound, and we were making a show called Audio Smut, which was a queer, radical, sex-positive feminist radio show, taking sort of like, you know, what we thought at the time to be like really beautiful sounding narrative radio and trying to tell really radical stories in that medium. We weren't very good yet, we didn't know it. But so then we got kicked off the station when we moved to New York and we were no longer local to Montreal. And that's when me and Mitra and all of our friends started making the show as a podcast out of our bedroom. My bedroom a lot, we call it the Mermaid Palace. And 3 really important things happened in those 3 years when we were making the show out of my bedroom in New York as a podcast. One of them is that we developed a sound that was truly unique and unlike anything else because we had no bosses and we had no one telling us how to make what we were making. We were just trial and erroring every single day, working side jobs all the time. The second thing that happened was that we developed an audience. Like we actually, launching all by ourselves, just via friends and living in New York where millions of people live, gathered an audience that was like relatively sizable. Relatively. It was like 20,000 per episode, but at the time podcasting was young, so it was like a big deal, you know? And then the third thing that happened was that podcasting became legitimate, and that was a huge deal for us because as a show called Audio Smut, where like we make stories about masturbating with like the real sound of masturbating in it, there were not a lot of networks like you know, I don't want to name names, but sorry, I did. So anyway, all the networks said no, it doesn't matter who I name. They were like, oh, we can't put something on called Audio Smut, whatever, and it's like, is that really the reason? But when podcasting became legitimate, we were free of the FCC and the CRTC and all the rules that would hold people back from greenlighting legitimately radical content. And Radiotopia was invented. And as soon as Radiotopia was invented, I was like, oh my God, we have to be on Radiotopia. It's the promised land. We have to. It's perfect. And so for a whole year, I was banging down their door, being like, please. And then finally, a year later, Carrie Hoffman took a call with me. And she said, if you change the name, we'll take you. And so we became The Heart. And so then 3 more years passed. So the cool thing about Radiotopia, or the model of Radiotopia, is that it's a network of independently owned and operated shows that help each other. And so the network, Radiotopia, like the model is, we help you help yourself. And that means that you own your content, you own your process, you own your business. And so when we joined Radiotopia, we didn't have to change a thing. It's part of the contract, like they don't exact any editorial control whatsoever. We got to keep making the show in the exact way that we made it, but with that extra support of like this incredible network and all the like some of the best shows in radio. Like Roman Mars being like, you gotta listen to this. It really made a difference. It grew our audience immensely. And it made us legitimate. It made people listen, people who would be afraid to listen to something called audio smut, listen to when Roman Mars tell them to listen to the heart, you know? And so our audience grew a lot, and our message, you know, went to the, you know, we weren't preaching to the choir anymore. It was so great. But one of the hard things about running your own business, running your own show, is that running a business is really hard. And we kind of fell into this catch-22, which was we make really high production value content. We're committed to that. We are committed to the art of radio, and we want to use it to tell the stories that we tell. But the problem was that, like, with for-profit, where you're relying on ad sales to, you know, pay the bills, you have to make more you have to make more stuff to make more money. And so we were in this sort of like cycle of like, okay, like we want to make less episodes so we can make the episodes better, but we can't make less episodes because then we make less money. And so we were just sort of like in that land. And in that land, yeah, I mean, it was like, that was one of the hard things. Like, we had ambitions and dreams for taking bigger risks and doing more elaborate projects, but we couldn't really do it. And also, it was that, you know, like when you're running your own business, you're wearing 8 hats, you know, like I was the EP, I was the marketing department, I was the like HR department, I was making the stuff, I was helping other people make their stuff, I was recording the ads, cutting the ads, you know, like doing all of those jobs at once. And so it didn't really leave me a lot of space to make my own work from my own point of view or do things that, you know, experiment. Like experimenting takes time. And so that's when
we met.
Yes.
We met at a podcast conference.
Yeah, in Paris. So
no,
romantic.
It wasn't in Paris.
I met the other Leslie in
Paris. The other Leslie I work with.
There's 2 Leslies.
It's fine.
Both very important. Yeah, yeah.
So we both had a problem. We both had ambition that was slightly beyond our own grasp, because even though I work with incredibly talented producers, we didn't have the scripted expertise that we were looking for to do something really experimental. And we also, frankly, didn't, you know, we have to work with a lot of external people as well as some internal, just because when you're working at a corporation like the CBC, people have jobs. And so when I want to get them to make a podcast, I have to second them. I have to go and convince their boss to free them up to come and work with me for a couple or 3 months. And it's really, really hard because they're so key on the shows they work on. So it was hard for me to accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish. And similarly, you were struggling to kind of take what you were trying to do to the next level.
Yeah, to do something a little bit more ambitious.
More ambitious, yeah.
Yeah. So then, I guess, yeah, that's our collaboration part. We collaborated.
Yep.
But then with collaboration comes risk.
Yeah, it sounds like it's overall a really positive story, but I think we wanted to spend some time having an honest conversation about some of the challenges, because it sounds like, oh, you know, we had all these resources, and Kaitlin, you know, inherited a marketing department and communications and legal department and all of the things that the CBC has, and I got this creative vanguard, this person who's going to really push us creatively, and that's all the positive stuff. But there were also risks, and I think for me, one of the biggest risks that I was conscious of was to the brand, the CBC brand. And just to go back a little bit to when I was telling you my origin story and talking about, like, CBC Radio is 84 years old, and I'm not going to make a crack about the average age of the listener of CBC Radio. But it's an institution that is amazing, and the programming is extraordinary, but to inject something new and to take new directions and to do something really inventive is very hard in a legacy institution like that. And so you have to do it really strategically, and you have to do it very carefully, because what you don't want to do is really piss off your core audience. You want to make sure that they're, that the new audience and the content you're creating for the new audience is going to work within the brand. And CBC has a mandate and a brand and pillars and all of that anything we create, no matter how inventive, no matter how different, still has to speak to that brand. It still has to be true to the CBC values. And so there's just tension there, and just it was something that was on my mind. And certainly I knew who we were working with was someone who'd done some very ambitious and very racy stuff, and that we had to have a lot of conversations about what the limits were so that you could be authentic and true to yourself, but we probably might not be able to go as far as you might have gone in other programs that you did. But you also grew up loving the CBC, so you know where we're coming from as well. Yeah, totally. I mean, the risks for me, obviously, were that, yes, it's a huge institution, and it has a sound, it has a brand, and I've built my whole career off of being someone who's known as being not just radical in the way that I tell the stories, but radical in the content, and a lot of the struggle for me and my team was getting big companies and big public radio networks and big public radio people to say yes to something that had an overt politic. That it's not balanced. It's not, always it's not journalism in that way. It's coming from a position, and that position is radical feminism. And the way that we make the show is true to that politic as well. And so that's always a bit of a sensitive area, but also, I'm so committed to representing life as it truly is, and a big part of that for me and my friends has been representing sex, representing our bodies as they actually are, and not in this sort of clean way. The dirtiness of it is a big part of setting people free and telling the truth about who we are, in my view, right? And I've spent 10 years building myself as this type of person, and I'm obviously so scared of walking into this relationship where I could betray the listeners that have stuck with me for the last 10 years, So we're both very conscious of our audiences and being true to them. And let's give them an example. An example. Okay, so this is a clip from The Shadows. It's just a small window into the kind of, the vibe that was scary for both of us to make together. And then I'll tell you what I had to do.
What's interesting about a mermaid is that she's two things at once. And I wonder if a mermaid is ever at war with whether she's a human or a fish.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. A quick question.
Yeah. Week after week.
I don't like Sesame Street. This is the wrong
Do you?
This isn't
well,
sexy.
But then there's the Dark Crystal.
It's not. What's that? We might need to change.
What? Month after month.
That was...
I think we have to go farther in. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay, back. Mm-hmm. Is there a back? This one.
1, 2, 3.
Charlie. Hey, Charlie. Have you ever wondered how to fuck a mermaid? You don't fuck a mermaid. A mermaid fucks you.
Charlie, wake up.
So that's a clip from The Shadows. It's a dream. It's a dream. The guy is asleep, and Kaitlin's in his dream, and she's a mermaid, and blah.
So picture me
Yeah.
in my corporate office. Thinking I probably should let my boss know about this content and just make sure she knew, she appreciated Kaitlin's work. She was thrilled we were doing this project together. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, and when Kaitlin delivers a cut, and there's more graphic stuff than that. That's actually a little bit mild.
It's the tame one.
It's the tame one.
We did the tame one for you guys.
But there was a clip in an episode, and one of my senior producer said, Leslie, you need to listen to this episode just to make sure you're okay with it. So already I'm thinking, okay. And what was the line, Kaitlin?
It's his perfect dick on my perfect clit. Never again a dick that fits so perfect.
Right. So I download the clip on my laptop, and I go down to my boss's office because she's all about no surprises. She's really supportive. She's supported this whole podcast journey that I've started at the CBC, but still I'm smart enough to know I better give her a heads up. So I download the clip on my laptop and I go down to her office, which is even more corporate than mine, which is saying a lot. And she's also, I love Susan. She's so supportive and amazing, but she's very honest about her own sort of nervousness about anything to do with the body. Like, she's not keen on anything that's too graphic, and she admits that about herself. So I'm like, oh God. So I'm going down to her office. Susan, I got to talk to you. So I have my laptop and I open it. I said, I just want to make sure you're okay with this. Now, don't forget, it's Kaitlin's project. We know, this is for a specific audience. It's on demand. We're going to have an audio warning. And before that meeting, I'd also reach out to a couple of colleagues at other public radio just to kind of get their, like, what do you think? Is this, would you go for this? And because I felt right about it, but it was good to have some ammo when I headed into my boss's office. And so I go to play the clip, and it doesn't work. And so we didn't have much time, and so I had to actually say that line to her. She said, well, what does she say? What's it say? So I had to actually say that line to my boss, and I'm trying not to sweat, and and it was authentic, and it was perfect for the project, but to actually say it to your boss, who's already declared she's nervous about stuff like that, was not fun. But there was some silence, and she listened, and she said, so is it true to the character? I said, it's complete. It's not gratuitous. It is, in fact, I think when it came to that moment in the relationship of the characters, if Kaitlin was not that bold and that honest, I think it would betray the whole piece. I really think all of a sudden she wasn't being herself, the character. And I really fought for it, and Susan said, I support you, you can do it. So it's like, yes! But it was just one of those moments where, to innovate and to move forward within a legacy institution is not easy. And you have to believe in it, and you have to make the right choices too. Again, it was so true to the story, and it was very important to the story.
I agree. I mean, I think that there's something weird about the fact that we don't say clit ever. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's, I don't know, it's like that weird unnaming of the body.
I had to actually have a conversation with Susan about clit versus dick, and,
Like, why is dick
one
fine?
slang, the other's slang?
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Anyway. I feel that was a coup. I'm really pleased. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome. I'm pleased too. But it's so there were bumps, and there was some sort of nuts and bolts challenges just in terms of how you worked for yourself.
Yeah.
When you were the only person who had to deliver to versus
Totally.
delivering to my entire team who was waiting for trailer material, waiting for log lines, waiting for episode synopses. When you've got a big institution, you have to have longer timelines because there are a million dominoes that can fall if you don't get stuff in. So I'd say that was another sort of little tension
and also
point.
because what I was doing, so The Shadows is like, it's a fiction project, but we did it in a way that was totally unconventional, and that was one of the best parts of working on this project and having the time and the space to do this, is that we were able to do a process that had never been done before. So things just took twice as long. And, with The Heart, it was like, okay, we'll put it up on the deadline and then we'll secretly replace it 2 days after. And like, there's no doing that at the CBC. Okay, I know, I didn't even try. We had to do.
What?
But anyway, didn't tell you that. I did. Okay, well, anyways, we'll go up, now we'll just show you what we made.
Yeah.
So this is a video trailer for the thing. Should I press it again?
One more time.
Press.
One of my greatest ambitions is to love. But the love stories I grew up on turned out to be fairy tales. And the truth requires a different kind of courage. I fall in love with everyone I meet. I have a crush on every single friend. How could you not? The more you learn about somebody, the more beautiful they become. I was searching every moment for a spark.
Have you seen the girl with the mind on fire?
I wanted to be romantic in relation to everything. The sun, the sky, the air. I wanted to dance until my soul broke free from my body until sweat shone on my skin. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. I wanted to close my eyes and ride. In this time, in this place, with these friends, in a city full of people who struggle to be one of a kind, who create new stories about love. This story, my story, happened here. The stories we love are roadmaps for how we live our lives. They tell us what we're looking for, what we want, what we measure ourselves against. The stories we love are the shadows on the wall, outlines of the truth that we take to be real. How do we know what's real? Does it matter?
Have you seen her now? Have you seen her now? The rumor is a 9 to 5 is weighing her down.
Yay. Cool. Yay, thanks, guys. So we don't have that much time left. I mean, should we open for questions?
Sure.
Or? Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
that. I'll just flip to the end. Oh.
Even just doing video was new for CBC Radio. Just because coming from television, I was very determined to have a video producer within our own podcast team because I really think it's, crucial in connecting people on all platforms to an extraordinary audio piece. The other thing I should mention too is we wouldn't be able to afford to do something like this that often either. Our budget wouldn't allow for that level of sort of experimentation on a regular basis, so we had to kind of do it strategically and for the right reasons at the right time.
Totally. Questions?
I have a question. I'm wondering if you both think that making it a fiction podcast rather than something that's a little bit more overtly nonfiction or somewhere that, I think it is somewhere in between in some ways, but like marketing it as fiction made it easier to kind of stay true to like what you wanted to work on.
What was the last part of what you just said? Sorry, made it easier?
Does it make it easier to, like, when you're thinking about, I think especially in terms of like having, like being able to be like, oh, it's a fake orgasm, like it's not real. Like that, is it easier?
Oh, I see.
Is it easier to work with something that's, something that you can call fiction in terms of like giving yourself more leeway?
Possibly. Although I think that's such an interesting question. I think if we were covering sexuality in a non-fiction way at the CBC, I don't think it would necessarily be harder. I think it made it easier to share and to market in terms of what audiences were looking for because we didn't have any fiction. So I think just in terms of the art, but in terms of the content, I actually don't know because I know our journalistic pieces have been very raw and very honest. So it may have in fact been a little harder in that regard in terms of how it pushed the envelope on content.
I don't know what life outside of making sexual content is, so I don't know easier or harder. I just know
is.
it. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's not really an answer. Sorry.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So you mentioned that you had a problem that you wanted to go into the fiction world, and you had a problem that you hadn't been able to explore all of the ambition of your projects. But when you decided to do The Shadows, did you already have a specific story that you were pitching to her, or did you just go, oh, Kaitlin does really good work, I'm going to give her the leeway to do whatever the heck she wants?
Yeah, I should correct what I said earlier just a touch. I was looking to innovate in terms of experimentation, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. I wasn't set on fiction. I was open to it because when we first started talking, I actually think my assumption would be that would be nonfiction.
Yeah.
But then you shared with us that you had these ambitions to do something that incorporated both fiction and nonfiction. The Shadows actually incorporates some nonfiction as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess how it began, I started, so like 4 years ago I made a radio play called Movies in Your Head, and it was one of the most successful episodes that we ever did. It went really, really far, it won a huge award, and ever since I made that, I was like, I want to make a whole show of this. And the way that the production schedule of The Heart turned out, it was just impossible to spend that much time. And so I wrote a treatment that was that. You know, I built out the whole story arc. I built out 6 episodes. I wrote down the descriptions of the episodes. I wrote a synopsis. I referenced Movies in Your Head. I mean, that was a big part of it too. When we say calculated risk, you know, we both took a calculated risk. So I'm not just like, oh, I kind of feel like making weirdo art stuff. I'm like, I've spent 10 years delivering really high quality content on a schedule, and I know, and it's award winning, and we have an audience and all of that stuff. So like that sort of set me up to do something risky in a way that it would be really hard to do if it was 10 years ago, or even 5 or 3. And then for me, the calculated risk was, I mean, I could tell, I mean, I grew up with the CBC, and I was like, I love the CBC, it's great, but I wasn't seeing it being on the frontier of anything. It was like the tried and true, you know, vegetables on the plate, right? And then, but I could feel it when Leslie started working there, because I started to see really interesting stuff happening, and I was like, ooh, something's happening. Like, what's going on over there, you know? And so for both of us, I think like we were both vetted in some way. Like I could tell that Leslie was like really serious about innovating, and that was interesting to me. And I'm also, on some level, a proven quantity. And so it was that kind of, but so I did pitch a very, like, kind of very, very detailed show, show description. But the thing is, I'd written that 3 years before it got greenlit. I wrote it, and then finally got greenlit, 3 years later. And so when I started working on it, all the ideas in the treatment were kind of old, and I was bored of them. And that was a big part of it too, is like the freedom that they gave me and the trust that they gave me to do what was urgent to the moment. I threw out that whole treatment, and we started from scratch. So that was a big part of the process. I think that's an important part of any process. I know that, I've heard that there's a very big show that all of us know that is, I won't say, but is developing a fiction. And they've been developing for 2 years, making stuff, throwing it out, making stuff, throwing it out. And I feel like to make something really, really good, you need to have that space. But it's expensive, and it can be either as expensive for the people who are paying for it, or it's expensive for the individual who's spending the time, in spite of what you're getting paid, to make it of high quality. And you have to ask yourself at what point, like, what makes it worth it, you know? And I think for both of us, what made it worth it is like to try to make something that maybe isn't going to be, you know, be on the top, like #1, you know, on the chart, but that is going to change the medium, you know, is going to reframe how people think about audio fiction, is going to make it into the canon, like, you know, striving for that kind of quality as opposed to downloads. You know, it's a different calculus. And you can't do it every day.
And even just to inject that kind of experimentation into the CBC.
Yeah.
Even if we don't, you know, I hope we work on other projects. We're talking about lots of stuff, but it's done what I was hoping it was going to do anyway, which was to inject an openness to experimentation within a place that was used to doing things in a similar way in the last little while anyway.
Yeah, it pushes the bar a little bit, you know, and it lets people, also, I mean, that's the best part about doing really risky work, is that you then, by taking that risk yourself as an individual, you make it safe for other people to take that risk too, you know, and then it reverberates. You give people permission to try things that they never would have tried, and that is valuable to me as well.
Yeah.